No, we're going to. I'm going to make sure that we're going live. Welcome everybody. We are live, and we have a new setup tonight. We've went with something called StreamYard over Riverside. We had some complications. Scott is dog sitting, so we're in a new location. We have an amazing man on the show. His name's Stanford Graham, and there are two dogs here tonight. So please bear with us as we navigate the moods of each dog.
Yeah, one of them is a Malinois, just like my late dog Lily, and the other one is a giant Mastiff. And I just couldn't possibly convey the size of this dog, but he would intimidate a lion. He's bigger than a lion. I think it's crazy. But yeah, you might hear them from time to time. I'm not sure. I don't have a whole lot of experience with these two, but you know, I might have to go referee.
Yeah, so Stan, I'm just making sure that we're in fact live on our Rumble channel. So to make sure everything's going smoothly here, and also our Facebook as well. So guys, just as people fill in how this interview came about, I went to an event that was it's for the 12 senses down in Boulder, Colorado, and it does look like we are live on Facebook, so that's good.
Oh,
that's
Facebook,
a start. Yeah. And I suppose, you know, this 12 senses group workshop put together by David Martin, there's some incredible people down there, and I see this tall guy, which is Stan, and he just had this presence about him. And I didn't know what he did. I'm still learning what Stan does, and he'll be sharing that with you guys as well. But you know, then I'm getting the feedback from other people that know him, and there's like, yeah, he's like this cool Yeti guy that just makes everybody else feel comfortable. And that's the thing about Stan. He puts everyone else at ease, and he also speaks fluent Italian, which is very cool. I do not.
Very cool. Yeah, guy that puts us to shame, and we are Italian. Are you Italian, Stan?
No Italian blood, man. It is just no, but
it just takes a little. Yeah.
So it's a matter of how much pomodoro. You know, it's a matter of how much pomodoro to puoi mangiare. Allora.
So yeah, we are. So Stan, now that we're live, why don't we start with, of course, a little bit about your background, and then we usually just let the conversation unfold organically, and then Scott will have some questions too as he learns more about you. But yeah, let's learn a little bit about you, and then maybe how you got involved in going to the 12 Senses workshop at the first year, which was 2023, and then I met you this year in 2024. So let's start there, because it's an amazing group of people, and led by, of course, the amazing Dr. David Martin. And if people are not familiar with David Martin, he has a video of him at Parliament, and over 4 billion people on the planet have seen it. So why don't we start there, Mr. Stanford Graham? How did you get involved in that?
So I'm second of 9 kids. I was raised on a small farm in southwestern Idaho, and so had the benefit of growing up in the dirt and digging post holes. You know, learning how to use a shovel is something that every young man should have the opportunity, a skill set that every young man ought to have. You know, how to properly use a shovel. But I went to law school out in Philadelphia. Became a lawyer. Actually, got my undergraduate degrees in philosophy and economics and Italian. Went to law school. Practiced law for a few decades. Ended up at the last 10 years or so doing international commodity transactions. Stopped practicing law and picked up some responsibility with a friend of mine, John Hewlett, who had established a company called Cardio Miracle. He was making a nitric oxide supplement and asked me, hey, would you come and help me grow this company? I said, sure. He's a friend of mine of 20 plus years. And so we got after that. This was just the end of 2019. So as it happened, this nitric oxide stuff that I had read up on was a protective gas molecule the body makes that protects the cardiovascular system. And it also happened to protect the very cells that the spike protein was designed to target. Mr. Ralph Barrett, the illustrious virologist at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and his Tonto Indian guy, Anthony Fauci, over there at NIH, these guys were working on this project together. One guy writing checks to the other guy to develop a weaponized gene therapy to give to humans that included this spike protein that was designed to actually change its target, the vector of its target from the digestive system of dogs and pigs and rabbits to the human heart and the human cardiovascular system in its entirety. And this is all public record in patents that have been filed over the course of 20 plus years that you mentioned David Martin, that his exceptional capacity at intellectual property examination, treaty examination, and the like. He's a global phenomenon. There's nobody that comes close to his capacity. Well, so I'm helping John develop this, the marketing and sales of this company. He had developed a product, this nitric oxide product called Cardio Miracle, and one day John sends me a YouTube link, and he says, "Hey, watch this guy and tell me what you think," because I'm kind of the science guy of the company. I'm a lifelong self-taught, biology, chemistry, nutrition. I'm an elite athlete. I run a pretty quick mile. I'm training to break the world record for the 15 over mile. I run about a 5:26 mile. Oh, I'm sorry, a 4:26 mile. 4 minutes and 26 seconds. It's pretty fast. So I'm a bit of a health nut for all my life. And so I crack open this YouTube link, Joe, that my buddy John Hewlett sends over to me. And it's this bald guy wearing a bow tie talking to this German lawyer dude. So it's David Martin talking to Rainer Fomick. I don't know either of them. And I watched for 7.5 minutes. And that 7.5 minutes, this Dr. Martin guy lays out the patent history cogently and quickly to come to the conclusion and to demonstrate immutably, with immutable evidence, this statement that we made SARS, the SARS-CoV-2 variation of the coronavirus clade virus. And he backed it up with patents. And I was tracking him with his patents real time. And so this just blew the gasket off of the story that I had bought in the first place, that there's some bullshit going on. And I heard him say that, Joe and Scott, and I promptly made a phone call to a friend of mine. I said, I'm going to send you this link, listen to this guy, just listen to the first 7.5 minutes, listen to it, and call me back. So my friend Brian, I sent it to him, he listens to it, calls me back, and I said, so, Brian, now that we know, this Dr. Martin, now we have some information, now we know we have to do something. Now that we have knowledge, we have a moral obligation to be stewards of that knowledge. We have to do something. How can we help this guy get this message out? And Brian said, well, as a matter of fact, Stan, Dr. Martin's a friend of mine. And I've known Brian for 8 years. He's never said anything. I said, do you have his cell phone number? Yeah, send it to me. So he did, I did. And the short story is, to sum it up, within 2 weeks of that phone call, David Martin was in Utah. I was here. We were up in Salt Lake. We met in Salt Lake, and I introduced him to a filmmaker friend of mine. We'd actually met there in Salt Lake on a Friday morning, so we could go in and meet Jeff Hayes, who's an award-winning film producer, documentary, film producer, and Jeff and Patrick Gentempo. Patrick Gentempo conducted the interview with David, and they filmed all of it, and it was a 4-hour interview. And I sat there and listened to that interview, and it was totally gobsmacked, just completely gobsmacked by what was streaming from Dr. Martin's mouth, the light and intelligence and wisdom and truth that was coming out was unprecedented in terms of an experience for me, and it was for everybody else in the room. Patrick has interviewed a lot of people, and he was slack-jawed, and that really started my relationship with David Martin on a number of different projects and a number of different concerns. And so that was the beginning of that beautiful relationship. On one of the flowers from that plant, some of the fruit of that relationship was getting to go to his, he invited me, actually gave my wife and I as a Christmas gift our tickets to last year's, the 2023 Limitless Humanity gathering in Boulder, Colorado.
Right.
Which was life-changing again, So that's how I got there in 2024. There it is. Yeah, there it is. And so, which is really quite an experience. Just summarily for everybody listening, we are under a assumed learning pattern that humans have 5 senses, and occasionally we'll suggest that women have a 6th sense. Well, what we learned from Dr. Martin is actually there are 12 cranial nerves that form when we're born, and those 12 cranial nerves establish 12 senses. So the number 5 and the number 6 are wrong. These are actually artifacts of the writings of Aristotle, actually Plato and Aristotle, who adopted that taxonomy from Plato. So Aristotle propounds this lie, this deception. I don't know if he was actually lying, but it was certainly incomplete truth being passed off as complete truth, which humans have 5 senses. And so for millennia, we've been taught that we are much less than we are, because to live fully human, and it's David's thesis, to live fully human is to live with operating at full capacity with those 12 senses. And without doing that, then we live far below our privileges and far below our capacity to fulfill our stewardships while we're in this phase of existence. So of course, listening to him for 4 or 5 days, because he never references a piece of paper. It's really one of the most profound experiences you can have, right, Joe?
It's unbelievable. And then people will ask him, can you repeat that? And he's actually like, no, take notes, get it from someone, because he's in this flow state. I mean, it's literally like he's downloading. It was a remarkable thing to witness. I still can't believe that I was in the room with 70 or 80 people at this event. This is something that, humanity needs to learn. And I think, and that's what's challenging about this subject matter. It's not so much the subject matter itself, but you can't just read it. You literally have to experience it to really fully grasp what it is. Because, Scott's like, well, how was it? I'm like, well, I can kind of tell you a little bit about it, but you have to immerse yourself in it. And it's one of those things, like, hopefully as the word gets out about what this class is, and there will be future classes, that more and more people can attend something like this in some capacity. It would be hard to do it without David being there and doing it. Like, I don't know who else can teach this stuff. So something like this.
It defies consumerism, right? It has something to do with what the way that he teaches and the way that we're able to learn and absorb and experience the information, actually to weave it into our lives so that we can live what we learn, right? Which is wisdom. Right? Human experience produces wisdom, not intelligence. Intelligence, as David would say, is a construct that is now a substitute for wisdom. And so, and it's a lousy substitute, because there's a big difference between intelligence and data and human and wisdom, which is derived from eons of human experience. And so Yeah, actually having experiences with David with Dr. Martin as he teaches actually the names and the functions of these 12 cranial nerves. Having the experience is really the thing. Anybody can read a book, but the application and understanding of how do I live now, so that I can manifest, bring into a into a world that is provable. How can I manifest the truth of the things that I've learned by the way that I live? Rather than saying, well, I believe this thing, we can actually learn how to learn so that we can say, I know this thing. Because belief is really just a statement, another way of saying, I don't know. I'm on the way to try to acquire knowledge. Right now, I have a belief. I'm testing out the belief against, different data that I get, different evidences that I'm getting I'm trying to learn whether it's truth, whether the information I'm looking at is human wisdom and truthful, or whether it's not. And David actually you'll remember this, Joe, he made a statement as we studied this 9-step process of how, in pursuing everything in the universe, has a 9-step process of progress from basically seed to fruit. And speaking by allegory, right? David says there's nothing more beautiful in terms of comprehensive wisdom and intelligence than that which comprises a seed, because it includes everything that it needs when it's grounded and nurtured to produce the ultimate expression of its purpose. And that humans are like that, and that we progress much the same way that a seed does, and go through the same kind of processes that a seed does to mature from a seed to a seedling, to this massive oak tree. And then the process of the oak tree being vertical, a tree that's vertical, to being a tree that's horizontal, and then feeding the earth and transmitting the wisdom that it's learned over the end of its life to all the other trees as it decomposes and enters into a different phase of treeness. Right? So looking at the way that humans can progress through any number of phases of life and be really limitless, because we're actually built that way. So anyway, so it's been fascinating, obviously, to have the privilege of sharing time with David and to work with him. So anyway.
Yeah, I find myself really intrigued with the 12 senses. Unfortunately, I wasn't in attendance, but I've been practicing a form of energy work that's kind of obscure called quantum energetics, and for about 30 years. And in the beginning work, it's all about aligning the facial and cranial bones and in alignment with those cranial nerves. And there's a map of the nerves and the whole bit. But the interesting thing is when you go through that alignment, you become extremely sensitive to what's going on in your body. So, you'll feel the symptoms of something long before anyone would ever diagnose them. And then you can do something about it in its infancy when it's an energetic disruption, as opposed to, without being aware of that, it progresses into something that's a little bit beyond that kind of simple treatment. But I'm kind of speculating here and thinking that, that might have something to do with these senses attached to the cranial nerves, or associated with them anyway.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
One of the things, yeah. One of the things I respond as I listen to you one of the things that's a takeaway from this experience of living as more fully human, that things that we would regard otherwise as somewhat miraculous or anomalous become regular. So, for example, during the last day, Scott, of this conference, this workshop, David just pulls one of the participants out of the crowd, just calls him by name. Jack, come up here, sit down. You're on the hot seat. We're going to talk to you about why you're here and how you came here. And he did. So he's a 25-year-old. youngest attendee. He comes up, sits down. David says, "How'd you come here and why are you here?" He begins telling his story. Well, I'm from Silicon Valley. I've accomplished pretty much everything I've set out to do. I'm currently working with. He was working with Apple. He's worked on several high level projects with Apple. Brilliant kid, and so I'm here just trying to figure out what's next because I heard about this 2 weeks ago, and I moved heaven and earth to get here because I just felt I had to get here. And so David he calls over to one of his friends in the room, Dave Lopez, and Dave's there for the first time. Dave's a good friend, and he says, "Hey Lopez, what was I telling you last month about wishing that I could meet a 25-year-old tech wizard kid who could help me develop a technology that I've been working on for 15 years because I just don't have the bandwidth to do it, to take on a project that needs to happen." And Lopez said, "Yeah, you did say that." And so as he's describing this, then he asks this attendee, let's call him Jake. He says, "Jake, so where do you work?" "Apple." "Oh, really?" Because the technology that David has is actually a communication technology that at the end of this conversation with Jack that just erupted into this beautiful thing. David said, "Look, he's obviously the guy that's supposed to be here because I have this technology, the value of which is probably $10 million that David's put into it over a couple of decades," and says, "Jack, I'm going to give it to you." And then he just says to everybody in the room, instead of having something like the iPhone, instead of, sticking with this terrible social technology we call the iPhone, why don't we do this group, if anybody that wants to be involved in this project, let's make the Wii phone. And Jack, you're in charge. Or Jake, you're in charge. I'm contributing my software and all my technology. And if everybody else in the room, we're going to take a 5-10 minute break, come back and if you want to be involved in this, come back and say what you want to contribute. Commit to what you want to contribute and let's go. But to see the story, that doesn't do it justice, but to see the story unfold from this young man who had decided to be there because he had seen a picture of David Martin, never seen him before, but saw him in a dream 2 months earlier. Saw David in a dream like 2 months before, and sees him and somewhere in social media, sees a scrolling advertisement of, "Hey, this event's going on in Boulder." And he says, "Hey, that's the guy from my dream."
Right.
That bald bow-tied guy, that's the guy he was in my dream. Who is that guy? Has no idea who he is, but trusts the vision that he's received because one of the cranial nerves that we have that actually attaches to the back of our eyes that helps us to see things not with photons, that helps us see things when we're asleep, by which we can have visions and dreams that inform us of the future that we need to pursue, that can inform us about how to live our lives better. Well, he had been operating off of this particular cranial nerve to see things that the ocular nerve doesn't present to us, because the ocular nerve, as you know, Joe, it's only half the vision. It's only photons that we're consuming and reiterating with that nerve. And actually we have two other nerves that are attached to our eyes to help us see things that are not visible in different states of consciousness. And so it makes the idea of it makes the ancient ideas of prophets who prophesy, who are seers, who can see things, right, and who can foresee or prophesy the future and be accurate. That it's not hocus pocus. We're actually built to receive correspondence, communication in ways that where our visible capacity doesn't serve us. And so it was really interesting. It was fascinating to see the reality of this 12 senses type of living unfold right in front of everybody.
Exactly.
And they had David and Jake had talked before. It just grew out, and it was beautiful to see this flowering of a phenomenal relationship for which David had been seeking and to which Jake had been led. when he was looking for the next thing that he was going to do. And David made a prediction, a forecast, a prophecy. He said, within 5 years, we will know Jake's name, because he will be in the best technology publications announcing the takeover of Apple. Or the downing of Apple, because now there's something better. I mean, so it was like that. And I put that on my calendar, man. 2029's in the books, because I'm watching for that to come around. So fascinating experience to see. And what at the end of that conversation, folks, one of the cool things what David's observation was, as we're all sitting there in attendance, just in a state of wonder and awe, David says, friends, for me, this is normal. This is normal. This is how things are supposed to work if we're operating, on 12 cylinders, right? On the 12 cranial nerves, as opposed to maybe a fraction of the 5 that we even know about.
Yeah, it was a beautiful moment, because you're witnessing, and that's why it's hard to explain. I mean, you're doing a good job just, getting people to, in a way experience through storytelling, but to actually watch this unfold, it was mind-blowing. Like I didn't even begin to tell Scott about that story, I don't think, yet, because I'm still processing that it happened, because David's so tuned into his 12 senses that he's manifesting. It's almost like manifesting and time traveling and all at the same time. And it's just like, so much of this stuff, to me, most of my life, honestly, till doing the show, it just sounded very woo-woo to me, and then, in doing the show and hearing Scott talk about some of his experiences, you start hearing more and more people talk about things, not exactly like this, but David's workshop helps me kind of put things together a little bit more, that this stuff is real, because it does seem like, that ideally that the creator would want something like this of people in his image, rather than, what we're currently seeing in the world. So it was a miraculous experience. I'm glad you actually shared that with the viewers, because it was jaw-dropping to watch that unfold.
Thank you, Joe. It's something that we can each experience. It's one of the valuable lessons that I had as a child, because I grew up on a small farm. Was we had a garden. We grew vegetables and fruits. We had a vegetable garden about an acre in size, and I knew what it meant to plant a seed, to prepare soil for irrigation purposes, to plant a seed, how to plant it, because different seeds have different depths at which they can be planted, and those kinds of things, all those kinds of things, to understand, to actually see what is this miraculous process that seemed quite normal, of putting a seed in the dirt, and then within a few months you have, sometimes within a few days, and then maybe a few weeks, you have a seedling, and then within a few months, depending on obviously what you're growing, you have the fruit of the seed. That makes a full cycle, and then you can let that plant go to seed and watch it produce additional seeds, so that it can continue, so that one seed will bear hundreds of seeds or dozens of seeds, which goes back to David's, these 3 principles of his integral accounting model, which is things which are true, or which are real. One of the ways to tell illusion from reality is that reality is generative. It propagates itself. That it's persistent. And it doesn't need any energy to continue. It has its own. It's persistent. And then third, it's orthogonally consistent. That is, that it can share what it has with as many people that want to observe or take advantage or feed from it, and they can observe the thing from any different angle and receive truth from that angle that doesn't compromise the truth that somebody else has from seeing the thing from a different angle and being, embellished by it. And a great example is the sun. Everybody on the planet can walk out and look at the sun at the same time of day. For some people, that's going to be at night, and they'll see the reflective light on the moon. But the sun is generative, and it's persistent, and it's orthogonally consistent. So that everybody can look at it at the same time, and it doesn't diminish the sun's capacity to deliver. And everybody can enjoy it to a maximum. And it's consistent as it delivers everything that it's delivering among however many people want to relate to it. And so those are three qualities that humans, that we can develop, that help discern the difference between reality and deception. And that's really that's the bifurcation that David teaches, that the 12 senses, our 12 cranial senses, help us discern reality from illusion. Because if you're living in illusion, then living a purposeful life becomes either problematic or troublesome, impossible. Right. When you're operating on, like they say, 12 cylinders, the purpose of life becomes phenomenally rich and exciting because things happen. And I'll give you an example. Here's an example. Just sure. In my personal life, just over the last couple of months. So David, I'm helping David on a project, a company he has called Raza. And Raza, David and a partner of his have developed a technology to extract hydrocarbons from tar sand, to extract the oil that in a tar sand configuration. And right now, there's very little oil being produced by tar sands because the current technology to do that is cost prohibitive. Oil has to get a lot more expensive before it's worth it to create the refineries, to acquire the energy so that you can create the heat and combustion, so you can cause the mechanical, chemical, and other phases to take place to somehow separate the hydrocarbon from this tiny piece of sand, and to do it so that the sand has to be cleaned, and there are derivatives and impurities, all these things. It's a terribly destructive practice. If you take a look at the tar sands up in Canada, it is a scar on the beautiful face of the earth. It's terrible. And so, in oil shale, all this. Well, David has a technology he and his partner have developed over 20 years that doesn't require any combustion. That can separate hydrocarbons as not quite 100%, but as close to 100% as one can imagine, by fractions, just 99.99, and you can repeat the 9 forever. But to literally invite the hydrocarbons to disassociate from any other molecule that they are currently associated with. So I call it a liquid magnet. It's a liquid, and so it separates all the hydrocarbons, none of the impurities, and leaves the sand completely clean. So that even the strictest labs in California can find no traces on the sand of any toxins. It's completely clean. And it does this extraction, Joe and Scott, at somewhere around 117 degrees, like it's a hot tub. So no combustion, basically ambient temperatures with no emissions, and somewhere between 7 to 17 seconds. And
wow.
And the hydrocarbons are so clean, and we have the tests from the Shell labs in London. The hydrocarbons are so clean that when they're combusted, there are no emissions, no toxic emissions, zero, no measurable toxic emissions.
That's impressive to say the least. Yeah.
So it's a wildly disruptive technology that would bless humanity with an endless source of clean fuel that it's clean and that is abundant and wouldn't create toxifying experiences just trying to derive it from the earth itself. And so and this technology that David had, this liquid agent, this reagent, can be used over and over and over and over. And so that's RASA. That's David's and his partner, their technology for hydrocarbon extraction. Well, so one of the things they want to Utah, I live in Utah, and Utah has a lot of tar sands, which are found in what we call wastelands, just deserts, just wastelands, right? Well, they're anything but wastelands. This is a total David Martin, ninja jujitsu move. It's the wasteland, but it's paradise in terms of human value. What lies there that would bless humanity? This isn't a wasteland. It is a land of magnificent abundance.
Wow.
We just are seeing it through this one ocular lens that tells us this place is a shithole because there's nothing, there's barely any plants. It's rock. It's like the San Rafael Swell. I mean, there's some gorgeous geographical geographic expressions in Utah, but these are the wastelands. And so anyway, so I told David, look, I live in Utah. Tell you what, I'm going to find some tar sands where we can place one of the experimental units so that we can start producing and prove out the concept in terms of its scalability. And so this last year I was after getting that done and came close multiple times, and I had to report to David like in December. But I couldn't believe it. I said, David, I have failed. I haven't been able to find a parcel of tar sands that somebody owns that says, hey, yeah, come up and park your technology here, and yeah, let's run it for 2 weeks or 4 weeks and see what happens. And so I'm calling him to say, David, I failed. I'm sorry. Haven't got it done yet. And he said, that's okay, Stan. You'll figure it out. And so I tell you, so here's what happened. That's what he said. Yeah, you figure it out. No problem. So within a week of that call, I call a friend of mine, a business partner of mine, Joe. And I said, Joe, so we're talking about several things we're doing together. And I said, I'm really disappointed because I wasn't able to deliver to David any of these tar sand parcels that I thought I could actually get done. And he says, well, that's interesting, Stan, but tell me about the tar sands. And I said, so I explained, here's what we're doing. He says, well, last summer I went to my high school reunion. Haven't been to one. I went to my high school reunion and I met a friend of mine at the high school reunion. And we've known each other since junior high. Well, Stan, she's like the managing director. She's the managing director of the Utah Trust Lands. I think an organization called SITLA, which is the School and Institution Trust Land,
Wow.
Well, as it is, she's the managing director over all the trust lands in Utah, which is like 4 million acres and she's the managing director of minerals and oil. And I said, so did you ask her to the prom and leave her in the driveway, or does she still like you? And you guys friends? And he says, yeah, we're great friends. And I said, will you call her and set up a meeting, set up a call with me and you, and then, well, the next step, we'll set up a call with her and David, her team of geologists and David, because then we can open up this conversation because her prime directive is to monetize the trust lands of Utah by production of the minerals, et cetera, that are on those lands, and to use the royalties that come from that production to fund schools in Utah, like the schools for the blind, the schools for the deaf, special education opportunities at the universities to cover healthcare for residents, hospitals, et cetera. All this wonderful human benefits that the trust lands of Utah that come from the federal government are supposed to be provided, that the Utah trust lands are supposed to provide to the residents of Utah. And the whole organization's been one train wreck after the other. And so, short story, I'll speed up the story. We met with her Monday. We met with this woman and her team on Monday after we had a great conference call with David and we set up the call for this week and met on Monday with absolutely extraordinary outcomes, and they're thrilled. And so just yesterday, Joe and I were driving out into the wastelands of central Utah to inspect some of these properties that we had identified as parcels to begin this extraction of hydrocarbons from tar sands that will change the world.
Wow. That's
And
fantastic.
Another story, where the synchronicity, because you're tapped into it. And I love David's confidence. Just like, don't worry about it, Stan. Because you guys are connected in helping each other and humanity. And this is just another one of those stories like you were sharing at the 12 Senses workshop where it just synchronicity was happening. It's crazy.
So to experience this as your reality is exciting and fulfilling, right? Because then you operate on communications you receive, on ideas you get, and you operate on them, you act on them, and you find out very quickly. Remember, there's this 9-step process that he says, here's the process by which all things in the universe operate, including a seed, growing from being a seed outside the earth into a seed into the earth, into a tree that bears fruit and becoming, a phenomenal experience on its own, whether it's vertical and when it dies and what it does when it's in the death, what we call the death phase, and how it spreads that wisdom throughout the forest floor. It teaches trees how to be trees because it has wisdom built into it and communicates that out. But to live that way and to see, oh my gosh, that's right, that there are things that are operating if we'll listen and follow and act on impressions. And everybody knows what that feels like occasionally, right? When we act on impression, we say, I need to do this, and we do it. And then we see something like, oh, wow, that happened. I wonder I'm sure glad I did what I did, because if I hadn't, then this thing wouldn't have happened, wouldn't have come about. So it's just interesting to see the phase go from, well, that's anomalous, to, damn, I can live that way consistently.
When you said 9, I think Tesla had a little something to say about 9 as well. If you understand 9, you can understand everything about the universe. Something along those lines. Anyway, I don't mean to murder the quote, but pretty fascinating.
Here's another part. Yeah. So here's another part of the broader. There's a broader arc to this story, because when I made a decision to work with my friend John with Cardio Miracle, it was when he asked if I could, I received a very distinct answer to go work with him. Whatever you're doing, Stan, leave it and go do that. It was very clear. Had I not followed that direction, would I have ever met David Martin? Probably not. Probably not. But following that direction and helping my friend, really at some sacrifice, helping my friend, and him making sacrifices for me so that we could help each other, led to hearing David and then me acting on this impression. I've been informed I must do something, calling my friend, we have to do something. Well, he's my friend. Do you have his number? Yes. Let's call him. And acting on it. And then within 2 weeks, we're sitting in front of cameras. And David, like I say, it was a 4-hour conversation, a 4-hour interview that they published uncut. And David, in gratitude to them, he reached out to them, Joe and Scott, and said, thank you, because in his lifetime, he had never been interviewed where the producers of that interview had left the film uncut and delivered it raw to the population. And that's what Jeff Hayes and Patrick Gentempo did. A 4-hour uncut video that was mind-blowing and a massive blessing, and they delivered it to hundreds of thousands and now millions and millions and millions of people. And Dave said over his entire life, no one had ever given an uncut message. His message had always been delivered with an angle of the producer, right? You put a little bit of a narrative or a shine or something on that message that he's giving from the producer's perspective, not David's straightforward perspective. So again, it's been a phenomenal 3+ years, 4 years for me since that, really since this process has happened, and to see one of the benefits that I've seen, Joe, that you're included now, is that I've seen an aggregation that I've never experienced in my life, really, at such speed, an aggregation of what I call fulcrum humans. I have had more fulcrum humans gathering around me or me gathering to them, because I don't think there's a center or a circumference, right? I'm not defining my existence that way, but there is a gathering of fulcrum humans that are earnest to create a better future than the current present, because the present is dissembling, right? That we've got chaos is growing, and fortunately, we all know, as a function of how the universe operates, that synchronicity and creation are a product of chaos, and that we all have an opportunity to participate intentionally in creating something that's much better as we push through a transition phase from where we are now, where really things are just ugly, things are in their death throes, and now we have an opportunity to create a much more beautiful life on the other side of this thing, as we go through some pain and suffering to actually bring organization out of chaos and beauty out of ashes, which is our task as humans. That's the beautiful stewardship we have with each other. And so to live that way is just, damn, it's great. It's stuff of legend.
Well, I have a couple of questions on the 12 senses that I think,
Yeah.
maybe it'll help the audience, because they weren't at the event any more than I was. And I can't get anything out of Joe that I can make sense of so much other than the cranial nerves. But there's an awful lot of conversation about how, and I've been fascinated my whole life with the idea that much of what we're experiencing is illusory to some extent. And I think that's provable, it's measurable, in a variety of ways. But if indeed we've been separated from these senses, by what function do you think that happened? And if that is indeed our natural state, would you suggest a way to reclaim it? And I know that's a really broad question. Maybe you can't answer directly, but I thought I'd get it out.
That's a pregnant question. Pregnant and prescient is fabulous. If that's how we're born, then where is the cause of the degeneration?
Right.
Then we're learning something that's false as we're maturing. Well, that's growth. That's an inverse.
This is Charlie.
There's an inverse relationship that we need to flip.
We just met today, so hi, Charlie.
Okay,
hey,
that's my buddy.
Okay, Charlie, go down.
That's why I was going to sit over there.
Here's an example.
Okay, you go ahead.
Here's an example, Tim, because that's a great question. Then how does this happen? Okay. So here's one of the first examples here's one of the first 2x6s that I got across the side of the head from David. Well, Stan, and this was in the context of a longer conversation. He says, well, have you ever asked yourself why, paper we use in school is 8.5 by 11 inches? Why is it 8.5 by 11 inches? Do you think that's just coincidental?
Right.
Do you think that the margins on the left side of that page are coincidental? Do you think that the ratio of the 8.5 by 11, don't you find it curious that shows up on the iPhone and the iPad? He says, so here's a thought, Stan. If you'll take a look into this, did you know that our ability to see and perceive reality, our peripheral vision and depth vision, all of this is affected, which is directly connected. Our ability to see like that directly affects our ability to think critically. So Stan, you're looking at a piece of paper this wide from the time that you're in kindergarten and school, and you're operating off of a desk. You're looking at a field of vision this wide for all your growing life, while your brain is just expanding quickly and it's thirsting for knowledge, your field of vision is 8.5 inches wide. And you're in a school that probably has very few windows. Instead of being outside and being able to have a massive field of vision, which induces your ability to naturally think critically. So what's actually going on here, where we're being taught in school and robbed of our ability to think critically? So who invented the 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, Stan? I don't know, David, but I'm going to find out, because that is heinous, because it's intentional, Scott.
I think whoever did it had something to do with the number 2 pencil.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And the black ink. Yeah, absolutely. He's going there. Go ahead.
Yeah.
So, and there's a reason that the paper is white. Because, you know, we used to be taught on black boards. Why is paper white? And why a particular color of white? Why not cream color or like parchment color? And so these are seemingly inane questions, but they're very disruptive questions, because if you pursue them, you find out that there are designs of evil and conspiring people who are seeking to dumb down humans, who are seeking to put them into a natural state of where their natural state is compliance rather than creativity, where their natural state is the inability to think critically, or even the lack of desire, not even being familiar with what it means to think critically. And of course, we've seen, and like one of the ultimate expressions of this in the last 3 years with this COVID scam, which it was a practice to see how many of let's see the percentage of the population that will comply because we tell them to, where the lack of critical thinking completely goes out the door. Not only out the door, but you're at the risk of being, you're at the risk of, being tied to a post and shot if you, speak something that, if you use your critical thinking and say, gee, what you're saying doesn't make any sense. So that's one indication. One question. One other question that David asked me, he says, so do you think, you probably think that Gutenberg's printing press was a great leap forward for humanity? And my immediate thought was, oh shit.
Of course.
Because of course, he said, so what was the first book they printed and what did they do with it? They corrupted it. They took the Bible and they corrupted it. So you have what is masquerading as a giant leap forward, which is one of the largest insults to the human spirit ever devised. It's the printing press. It's the suppression of thought and the compulsion of it's compulsion. It's the plan of direction by compulsion. It's the idea of creating illusion and saying this is reality, and then robbing the people of the ability to discern between the two, because you only have 5 senses.
Well, it would seem that the more we mechanize things, much like the printing press example, the more we separate ourselves from our ability to do these things naturally. And, when I look into nature, I think of, all the birds that can see infrared spectrum and so many more colors. So many animals can see more colors. They can smell better. This dog right here can hear what's going on 2 doors down and probably smell what's going on 4 doors down.
Sure.
And I think that we had that kind of. I knew she was going to co-host tonight. It's okay. A lot of personality.
Yep.
We can put her in the crate if we need to.
Well, she's okay for her.
But I think when we see the internet and we see artificial intelligence and all the ways that these things are seemingly making our lives easier, I also see culturally we're drifting away from the ability to communicate to one another in a meaningful way, to communicate with one another. It's just
so as we talk about social media, it's the digital imposition on analog living. and calling it, and then even pushing that to virtual reality. I mean, it is so, when you take a look at it, when you slow down, as David said, you slow down to the speed of consciousness, and you take a look at what is happening and say that, gosh, one of the greatest advances, Elon Musk had something really funny to say about this. It's like, when I was growing up, sitting close to the TV was called dangerous. My dad would say, hey, scoot back, it's going to turn your brain to chicken fat. We just didn't watch TV much because it was like, hey, that's going to turn your brains to chicken fat.
Yeah.
And but being close to the TV was the thing. And so now Elon Musk says, now I'm going to put a TV on my face.
Yeah.
Hey, this is great. And call it, virtual reality. Like, oh my God. Whereas we can actually live reality by engaging in an analog platform with actually humans. I can go to Boulder and I can meet Joe. And Joe and I, because this is a great platform too, but I'll tell you, it'd be better face to face. It would. Because
Right, of course.
You can do things in only in analog that can never be done virtually, regardless of how close you can smash the virtuality to your eyeballs, which excludes 11 other senses. And that's reality. I'm using one sense. This is so cool. It's real. I can't, and excluding 11 other senses. That's insane. And it's being sold as, the grifters are selling bullshit again. There they go. So.
Yeah.
And so one of the ways to turn it around is look at it in the face and laugh, because it is it's absurd. It looks, these tech guys, they're so advanced and so sophisticated. Like, bullshit. This is one of the dumbest ideas I've ever seen. It's this virtual reality. What's wrong with reality? What's wrong with it? Why do you have to create something virtual? Dumbass. It's like, engage with people. Engage with people. So it's much more exciting to be with a human than the virtual representation of a human.
Right.
So Scott, to answer your questions on how do we get to where we are with 12 cranial nerves and not even being aware of how can they be caused to be to degenerate without our own knowledge. The other is, we've been told that, for example, our olfactory nerve, and Joe, you remember this, we're told this is it's the sense of smell. No, it's not. There's no such thing as well, arguably, what is a smell? But as David expressed, the olfactory nerve is actually a homing device. It's the first of the 12 to develop. And so when the child is born and it feeds at its mother's breast, the mother has a scent that is uniquely hers in all the world, and the child has a scent that is uniquely the child in all the world, and they bond in a way with that original, the first of those cranial nerves. And that's why, like on a farm where I grew up, you could have 1,000 cows in a pasture, separate 1,000 calves from those cows, and then reintegrate them, and every calf will find its mom.
Right.
Every calf will find its mother, because the udder the calf has a nose, and it is a homing device, and it can sense its home, its mother. And of course, so David says, is it coincidental that one of the very common side effects of gene therapy injections is the loss of our olfactory nerve? You lose the sense of smell, you lose your homing device. That a mother could actually lose a child. In California, you have laws where they can take, if you don't, agree with your child's sexual deviation or whatever, then the state will take the child from you, and can do so if there's a sense of a loss of the olfactory nerve. Then you can separate mother and child without a concomitant sense of grief and loss, because there never was a homing relationship built between the two. That's insidious, but it's going on. That reaction of losing the shutting down the olfactory nerve as a function of the gene therapy injections was intentional. It was built to destroy family relationships. That's insidious. And so we've been told for thousands of years, we have a sense of touch. No, it's not. It isn't touch. You try to define touch. I mean, we have pressure, we have temperature, we have all kinds of things, but we call it touch. It's not. It's everything but touch. It's all kinds of things. So there's even a persistent messaging of how we characterize the five senses that we're seemingly somewhat aware of. Because if I have a sense of, I can see things, and I shut my eyes, now I can't see, which dismisses the ability to see the other side of everything else to see, which is not a function of photons. It's when I close my eyes and enter a different state of consciousness, I can get just as much vision as I can get with my eyes open, but different, with a different purpose.
Boy, that brings a few movies to mind. Like the old Kung Fu series and whatnot. That ability to see without the burden of the eyes, almost.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Isn't that beautiful?
It is.
Isn't that beautiful?
It's amazing.
So
we're almost, but depending on these senses, out of kind of a consensus, relationship with the world and each other, we don't really stray beyond that. Maybe we need to look at those senses.
Gotta love the dog. It's awesome. You're muted.
This is what happens when you do a show when you're house sitting.
That's great.
Yeah,
I love it. Analog life, non-studio life. Yeah.
Okay.
Here, I'll go check the door.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Yes. Yeah. Well, yeah. It's an adventure. That's why we have that down at the bottom there. So I guess this leads us to what's that? Okay. Sorry, guys. So how do you see the future unfolding? I mean, we're going through, as far as this narrative we've, been learning the awakening of the last 4 years. There's so many dangling carrots, and what's amazing is having someone like you come on the show to let people know what is going on with, an amazing group of people that are you being a part of it to help change the world and a paradigm shift in energy, etc. But how do you see things unfolding till more people can become aware of that there are really good things happening? Like you just wonder, I'll just let people know. Someone did a Facebook post today about woke and consciousness, etc. And I basically started letting people know about what's going on with the children and there's a movie called the War for Children, and they're just not seeing it. There's a lot of parents they've completely bought into the narrative. Then there was, they don't want to listen to me because I'm a white guy is kind of the vibe I was getting from this post. And I said, well, hey guys, forget what I'm saying. I found this video of a gay black man that was talking about it's called the War on Children, and what he was talking about was completely in sync with that film, and they didn't even want to hear it from him. And I'm just like, I guess my question is, what kind of event or what is it going to take to get some of these folks to really understand the depths of lies that they're living in agreement with? I mean, they're okay compromising their children and having surgeries that you can't reverse these surgeries, and these kids are so young. And so it was just it's really heartbreaking for me to watch that, and still 4 years in that this is going on. So go ahead. I'm going to mute this while you talk.
So I think one of the ways to respond to what is going on, well, first is to recognize what is going on. Just within the last week or so, I, in a conversation with Dr. Martin, heard him heard him clarify that what we think is the fount of knowledge, Google, right, is not a search system. It is a delivery system. You're being told what to think because everything that is on Google is curated. It's curated. Now, that doesn't mean it's all bad. No, I mean, but there's a lot of great information there that can be assimilated, and you've got to triangulate information. And to think critically, you really need to do forensic analysis and thinking if you really want to discern reality from illusion, and learn how to use your 12 senses because they can serve you very well. So one of the things that is sold more than anything now is fear, right? Fear is sold. That's now a consumer good. I think GAAP principles are suggesting that it be depreciated over a 5-year period. I don't know, but I'm kidding. But fear is almost like it's like a computer now, or any other piece of hardware, or, a toaster, whatever. Fear is a consumer good that is perpetually being sold, and we're being told that just how bad everything is, and so we need to be afraid, which is what. That's the outcome that somebody is seeking who wants to get an advantage over people who are not afraid.
Well, if I can respond to that, Stan, this is kind of interesting. It plays into a conversation I've been having all week with anyone that will listen to me. But because I believe that most of our reality, and that you use that term in air quotes, is curated. It's incredibly curated, but it's curated in a very deliberate way to confuse. And now we're living in a time, and I think it may be the first time in humanity. I think there's a whole lot more of our history that we really don't know anything about. I think that's deliberate as well. But we can't agree on what reality is right now. Like, we are literally living an experience, a human experience, with all of us together without any ability to have any kind of solidarity with one another. The fear is a huge, huge factor in all of that. And, for the human mind, that creates a bit of a crisis that we all live in on a daily basis because no one can agree on reality. And please respond to that.
Yeah. So we are taught that we have a fight, flight duality as part of for example, of our endocrine system. Our endocrine system includes all the glands that produce secretions, like adrenal glands that produce adrenaline, right? And so we're taught that one of the natural conditions of humans when they're put at risk is a fight or flight syndrome. And David's not here, but he's the subject of the conversation, so let's continue. So Dr. Martin would say, that's a lie. That's a lie. We don't have a fight or flight syndrome, or that's not characteristic of humans. What we do have is a natural state of calm, which is a function of a very specific cranial nerve, is to keep us in a state of calm. Even when shit is hitting every single fan around us, is to be able to stay calm and to think critically and to respond appropriately, and not to let what's going on around here affect our ability to perceive what reality is and what the illusions are that everybody else is attempting to create. It's that state of calm that has been hijacked. So here's an example. One of the things that we did to experience this, because that cranial nerve that is responsible for our natural state of calmness is not only for our personal benefit, it's for the benefit of our neighbors. What David teaches is you'll learn that half of your cranial nerves are to serve you. The other half are both to serve you and others.
Yep.
So for example, the nerves I have in the cranial nerves that give me the sense of taste. And we did an experiment on this. But when I taste a lemon, my face is going to screw up. Or if I taste, some people can't stand the taste of sardines, and they will get this putrid look on their face that, oh my gosh, this, oh, like this. But they do that in company. We eat together, we eat with others. The person who is having this facial expression to the sardines can't see their face. Everybody else can. And the benefit of that nerve that's adjudicating the taste in the mouth is communicating that data for everybody else's benefit.
And they do
So
to avoid
that's
it.
service, right? It's like, oh my gosh, I'm not eating that. You know,
Right. Yeah.
right? I don't have to. I can experience vicariously what my neighbor's going through, because the cranial nerves that they have are built to serve me as a member of the community. And so one of the other ways we did an experiment where last year we actually put our face in a river. Just, you know, and it's winter in Boulder, Colorado. You got ice on the river, you know. I'm out there busting the ice up in the morning, going out and doing, you know, plunges. It's awesome. But so we had these bowls of ice water. And so we have a maxillofacial, we have a cranial nerve that serves our entire face. And that nerve has this phenomenal ability. So here's what we're testing. You put your face in the water and you're holding this piece of technology that measures your heart rate. It's basically a handheld EKG, so it's measuring a number of things. And for people who do cold plunges, you know what the natural reaction to cold is, to retract and tense up, and your heart rate goes up. All kinds of things happen. You lose your sense of calm because you feel threatened, because we're putting our face in cold water, which is not natural. Nobody does that anymore. It used to be on the regular. That used to happen as a part of human experience on the regular. Not anymore. And you can't breathe. So you're underwater. So we're going through this experiment with all the other participants, right? And so David, and so here's one of the things that we do. So David says, look, when everybody's going to put their face in this bowl of ice water for 30 seconds. And when there's 10 seconds left, after the expiration of 20 seconds, we're going to start yelling support messages to the person who has their face in the water. So everybody else is going to say, come on, you can do it. You can make it to 30 seconds. You can do it. Because you might think that you can hold your breath for, I don't know, 2 minutes, but you put your face in cold water for the first time in a long time, you get uncomfortable in like 10 seconds. If you're not used to it. So here we are. So my experience there, because we did this last year, I know what's coming. So here's what happens. I put my face in the water and I'm there for 20 seconds, and then everybody starts shouting support for me. You can do it. You can do it. You hang in there, hang in there. And so David prints out our EKG readings the next day, and he says, okay, so look, here's Stan's. Look at his heart rate for the first 15 seconds, 17 seconds. I'm going bam, 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 bam. And my heart's in great shape. I run all the time. So, but then at the 19 or 20 second point, when people start shouting support, my heart rate expands to like 7x. So it just slows down. Like my whole body goes, ooh, calm. So it went from this bing, 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 bing to boom, boom, boom. And so David, his reaction was, I've never seen anything this dramatic, but it shows that support from people actually has a physiological effect. When we feel when we feel pressure, under stress, etc., and we're pushed out of that sense of being naturally in a calm state, that support from others can reposition us back to that calm state. Not that the exterior environment changes, or not that the facts change, or the challenges or whatever, but we can face them calmly. And so it was a beautiful example of, for me to actually see so clearly the biological, psychological, physiological effects of support on the calming, on the way that our body can interpret that to return to a natural state of calm, and stop believing the lie that it's fight or flight, because it's not. That's a lie about our cranial nerves, and it's a lie about our biological systems. We are built by nature to be in a state of calm. And so the opposition's work is to disrupt that calm and tell us, oh, that's natural. That's a fight or flight syndrome.
Right.
That's a function of your adrenal glands. And there's nothing you can do about it. Instead of saying, well, actually, there is something you can do about it. You can work together. You can do things together with supportive people. So work with people who will support you. Ask for help. Ask for support. And so it was, again, just another experiential knowledge instead of book knowledge, et cetera, empirical data, whatever. But having that kind of experience with 50, 60, 70 other humans who are behind you saying, hey, you can do this. And there were people there, Scott, that had never done anything like this, that were nervous as hell. They were just going gonzo, thinking, oh my God, I gotta put my face in this dirt, in this water. And they did it. So it was marvelous. In fact, there was a woman there. Well, there was a woman there. There was another miracle. David said, this is the first time in history this has ever happened. Who had a malformed heart. Actually, she had a malformed heart, and then her hands were. She was born. I forget the name of the condition, but her hands were disfigured at birth, and so she only had really one finger to put on this EKG device, which actually requires to get accurate readings. She had one functional finger, and the readings were accurate. And David, he was so, I don't know if you remember this, Joe, he was so enthused to see the response to this. He read the data just as it was happening, and he looked like a boy that had been let loose in the candy store with a pair of scissors.
Yeah,
he was and said, I can't believe this has happened. This is the first time in history we have made history here because of these facts. And look. And so it was marvelous to see that this fact of, well, we're living in this time where confusion is being sown, fear is the harvest of the day. But if we work together with people that support us like we're doing here, then marvelous things happen. We can think critically, we can discern between deception and illusion, and we can help other people see. Not with these eyes, but we can help them perceive so many different ways, 11 other ways of what reality is. And when people get a taste of it, when you get a taste of it, you want more.
Well, and you want to share it. Now, the thing is like I guess I've been kind of waiting to have a discussion with someone else about it, much like we're having now, for Scott to understand it, and then folks can actually do that. People can be at home and they can fill a bowl of water with ice, or bowl of ice water, and they can actually, see what that's like. And
it will change. You notice it will change your attitude for the day.
Right.
It will if you feel anxious, depressed, anxiety, etc., fill up the sink with cold water, dump some ice in, and put your face in. A few times, 30 seconds at a time, it changes it. This surface area is built for a purpose, and it's served by a very specific cranial nerve to serve a purpose. And one of those is to reestablish a sense of calm.
And it works wonders on a hangover as well. But I've got a question for you. So,
I wouldn't know anything about that.
The idea that the fight or flight is kind of an erroneous thing. I've had these experiences, and I've talked to a number of other individuals that have as well, where, been involved in a car accident, or I've had a severe injury with broken bones, or, been in a fight or something like that. And my reaction is an extreme calm and an incredible focus where decision making becomes so much easier. It's a state that it comes with a high, it's a very strange and altered state. And those are the kind of extreme situations that put me in that state. And I'm not alone. There's probably people in the audience that have had the same experience. Does that make sense? What would you say to that?
Yes. I mean, our body responds to, there's no question that our body is built to respond to stimuli, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so we can have experiences with our bodies that are, well, you hear stories of people that exhibit superhuman strength when necessary without thinking about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think we can all recall some times in our lives when we've had an uncommon sense of clarity about what needs to happen. I need to talk to somebody. Like, here's who I need to talk to now about this thing. If I have a conflict with them or need to resolve something, I need to tell them something. We're built to receive it. So here's another. If you take a look at our genes, our actual genes, they look like antennae because they are.
Yeah.
They're antennae. So we're walking around as a function of this massive gene construct. And the purpose of the genes is to receive and transmit information. That we have a connection with the creator, and we have a connection with each other because we are built to receive and transmit information. Is a kind of an awkward word to use, but okay. Here's as an example. So you've been in a large room, like a big ballroom, a big function, and somebody comes into that room who is not a good person. Now, you might not even know who they are, but they bring with them a sense of who they are. Nobody has to say anything, but the communication is clear. And there isn't any way that that person, well, they can attempt to mask it. They can put on a portrayal, a mask. We talked about mascara, where that came from, right? Mascara, which was the Egyptians had developed out of crocodile dung. So it obscured the pupil of the eye so that the king, the pharaoh, could sit on his throne and be able to look around and look at other people without them knowing it. That the black mascara would mask the direction of his, or the pharaoh's eyes, or the court's members' eyes, so that they could look without being looked at. And so so anyway, the more experience, so a person can come into a room, and whether they're wearing a mask, because that's where the word mask comes from, is this word, the mascara, which is an Egyptian word that comes from this particular practice to create this particular deception. That's where it all comes from. And now it's taught that, now mascara, that is masking, the women are taught that masking their face is something that you do to look beautiful. Well, that's weird. That's really weird. Really? So again, it's a corruption of manipulation of human senses. But we're built so that we can actually discern between what is real and what is illusion, what is true and what is false. And it's actually learning to train, understanding that we're built to receive communications, built to receive correspondence. And we need to honor that by acknowledging it and acting on it when we feel, when we have a sense, which is a totally loaded word if you're talking about 12 of them. When you have a sense to do something, to say something, right, to act, that if you honor that sense, then you soon find out that there's a manifold of things that happen. as a result of honoring that sense, then it's almost as if, and I say this hypothetically, although it's reality, it's almost as if if you demonstrate that you're a good steward, that you'll be entrusted with greater stewardship, that you can be entrusted with more because you honor the senses that you have and you act on them to create the benefit for more people and more people and more people. And so you're given more opportunities. And I really attribute this, I think this is the reality that I've seen in my life over the last 3+ years that I haven't really seen in such an accelerated, concentrated way, where just the almost to 100% the people that I work with are fulcrum people, where they're really, the fulcrum is this, right? Here's the fulcrum where you have, it's like you're tipping a scale. The fulcrum is that sharp point on which the flat piece sits. It's like a teeter-totter, and or like a post on which a gate swings. That's the fulcrum. And in order to get, I'll use the gate analogy, because I was around a lot of gates on a farm. So you could get a gate that's 15 feet long. So if I move a gate 3 degrees on the post, that covers maybe 2 feet, 15 feet out.
Right.
So the effect of a fulcrum is magnified the further out you go, right? That its consequences, if I'm a pilot and I'm heading at a destination, and if I'm a half a degree off, if I give that 6 hours, I'm hundreds of miles off target. And so, and we can say that fulcrum folks are, you can put this in a good light, that fulcrum people cause that wobble to disrupt the current state of things, to create better conditions of things. You can create the wobble effect, right? It doesn't take very much. I mean, Jenga captured this in a game, right? You stack this, right? It's a fulcrum game. It's position and pressure. And so it teaches this very, very well, that if you disrupt the base of the tower, the entire tower collapses. That inflection point, from the bottom, it's very small, but at the top, it's massive. And so people, as fulcrum humans, we can do things that cause just a slight wobble that create massive effects, whether in terms of time or distance, however you want to say. But then this is another principle that David teaches so well, is the wobble effect. That happens as a function of reality is on a fulcrum all the time. And so to create a difference, a positive difference from a condition that we don't want, that we want to change, doesn't mean you have to change everything. You can change this small part of one thing that can create a substantial enough wobble that the outcome of that wobble is massive. And it's true. It's really true. So we don't have to do massive things. And as individuals, we can do small things as fulcrum humans that have massive consequences.
Very beautifully put.
Yeah. And we aim to disrupt. So
exactly. It's all about disruption, baby.
Well, Scott, TruthStream was, I was dabbling with doing some shows, and this was Scott's idea, and it, finally I felt comfortable enough in the world, having watched a couple other shows for a couple years, and it's been an amazing experience to, like, what we do is we have conversations with people like you, and I can't think of a more rewarding, beautiful thing to do. I mean, so a friend I've known for decades of my life, we get to have conversations with people like you, and then share that with people that some we don't know, some we do know, but that's the fulcrum right there. Just because we decided to say yes to something, that it's enriched our lives so immensely, that it still blows my mind sometimes that we're even doing this.
But man, does it scratch the itch, because I'm telling you, a lot of the conversations that are available, in everyday life tend to, they're a bit shallow. They don't really go anywhere. And in the most extraordinary situations that we're in, I think, historically and otherwise, no one's really talking about it. And if they are, it's not terribly meaningful. That baffles me. But I bring it up on the show all the time. But I'm feeling compelled to bring up Terrence McKenna again, when he said it's just going to keep getting weirder and weirder and weirder until we start talking about it. So this is kind of an effort to talk about it, because man, is it getting weird.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I agree. Things are weird. But it's the exciting thing about this, the fulcrum effect, is that you cannot predict the either the qualitative or quantitative consequences of a simple act. Unpredictable.
So true.
Here's a story. Okay, so another example. So it involves David Martin. Ironic. So David's needing to get to Utah because we're going to have a specific meeting for a specific purpose a few years ago, and he's going to be in Arizona in the morning, in Phoenix, giving a speech. Needs to get to Utah by early afternoon, and then needs to be in San Jose, or actually Sacramento, Yuba City, that night to talk, to present to a few thousand people. And he says, I don't know how I'm going to, Stan, I don't know how I'm going to make this work. He said, hang on a minute. So I have a friend who has a plane, and he loves to fly it. He loves David Martin. And so I call Brad. Hey, Brad, I have a favor. So David Martin's going to be in Arizona on this particular day. I need you to fly down there and pick him up, bring him up here to Utah. I would actually like to meet at your house, Brad, for this particular meeting. Would that be okay? And then if you could just fly him down to Yuba City by 6 o'clock, could you do that? And he said, I'd love to. I said, great, because I have David on the other phone. I'm adding him now. Bam.
Oh, that's
and
great.
So he was, he had massive appreciation and love for David Martin, had never met him, never spoken to him. I had delivered one of Brad's books to David because he knew that I was working with him. He said, would you please take one of my books? It's called The Emotion Code. Would you please take one of my books to David? Sure. And so I delivered the book to David, and I send Brad a picture that says proof of life, and because I wanted something from Brad. I said, if I do this, then I'm going to come back and ask you for something when I need it. And this was the ask. I need you to, would you get David? And so he and David had a conversation, and it worked perfectly. And Brad and his wife, Jean, picked up David and Kim. And David told this story when he was in Yuba City, saying, I came in on the wings of an angel this evening to get here. And he says, I want to thank Jean and Brad, because he said, who could have foresaw that Brad has been blessed in his business to have resources to buy a really nice plane. And he purchased this plane how many years ago, and he became a pilot. And who would have foreseen today, when the necessity of that plane became very clear, that it was needed? And then he paid me a great compliment. He said, and I want to thank Stan, because Stan was connected. That when I expressed a need, Stan said, let me make a phone call. And he had a connection to Brad. Stan was connected. Brad knew that Stan was connected. So when Stan made an ask, Brad said yes. And he said, so here we are. And the main thrust of David's thesis on this, and Joe, you'll recognize this, is that when we're born into this life, wonderfully and fearfully made, we are fully equipped. We are fully provisioned to do everything that we're going to be asked to do. And one of the marvels of that, to me, one of the biggest illuminations of being able to work with David, specifically because I'd never seen my life that way. When I had communications with my Creator, I would always ask for things because I had been taught to ask, that this was a pattern of prayer, that you thank you, and then you ask for things. And David had told a story when he was a boy of 6, that when he was sitting at a table doing his Greek and Hebrew translations, and his mother saying, "Yeah, you got to finish your translations before you go out and play." And he says, so I said a prayer and I told God, help me complete my translation work so I can go play. And the voice came back and said, don't ask me for anything ever again. And it happened 2 more times. And so hearing that story from David, it actually changed the way that I communicate with my Creator. I no longer ask for things because I've learned that even the story of creation demonstrates that all created things are fully provisioned to complete their purpose. And part of that provisioning, being fully provisioned, means that those people that we're connected with can understand the needs that we have and be part of that provisioning. That a way will always open to accomplish the to accomplish the stewardship with which we have been entrusted. And so it was, as David explained, that really one of the first times I had heard that David teach this beautiful reality, that in terms of being fully human and connected, is that when we say we're fully provisioned, that means that others can fulfill provisioning that we need, but we're fully provisioned because we have the relationships with the people that can actually get us what we need to accomplish the thing that we've been tasked with. So part of being fully provisioned is really one of the greatest types of wealth that we have in this life, which is human relationships. And that being fully provisioned and being fully human means that we engage with each other and provision each other. David needed a plane ride. He needed to get to 3 different points on the map that were just impossible, until Brad stepped into the picture and said, "Yeah, I'd love to give you a ride." And he did. But it's because I had a friendship with Brad for many years, and he's a lovely person, and it was beautiful. So it gave me a different way of looking. It gave me a different way of looking at people, to understand that they're necessary. They're actually created for my benefit, because they're provisioning me and I'm provisioning them to accomplish the very things with which we've been entrusted. And those can happen in ways that we never anticipate, but that we've been prepared for in advance, that happen naturally. They're not hard. There's no inertia. They happen. And that's really coming back full circle, that when David called Jacob to sit on the sea, he's like, well, Jake, we're here in Boulder. How did you get here? Why are you here? And the outcome of that is, hey, let's start a project. Who wants to participate? Let's make a Wii phone. Let's make a social technology that is actually social and not antisocial. Let's flip the script and do some ninja jujitsu, a la David Martin, and use it.
I love it. A Wii phone instead of an iPhone.
Totally.
It was brilliant.
It was brilliant. Yeah. It was brilliant.
Wow.
And what was ironic, Scott, at the windowsill behind David, there was an apple sitting there. There was a red apple in the windowsill.
Wow. Yeah, it's blown my mind that we've never been more connected, through technology like this before, and yet we are more separate than we've ever been. It clearly has had the opposite effect, and I think that's probably by design.
Sure, absolutely. So like good words for us.
Because it really limits. Yeah, exactly. It limits our power, which is a threat to what? I'm not sure we can define that in 5 minutes, but the more connected we are, the more we're participating in this, the more we're in service of one another, the more we loan our airplanes out to friends. That's a powerful exchange that really moves mountains. It changes the world. And yeah, and that's why I think it feels so good to be in service. Yeah, I mean, just, you know, I met people of extraordinary wealth that that will tell me that the most gratifying experiences they've ever had are the moments that they've been in service to others.
I think that's beautifully said, Scott, because David would say that's really the only question that each of us can ask now. Is we're fully provisioned. The question is, in service to whom? In service to whom? Because we are built to serve. Who are we going to choose to serve, and in what intentions, why, and what outcomes for humanity? You know, in the conversation that David had with Jeff Hayes and Patrick Gentempo, Patrick started the conversation by saying this. He said, David, let's start with the conclusion. What's the conclusion of this conversation going to be? And David said that there are two kinds of people in the world. There are those who think humanity is disposable and expendable, and those who think humanity is divine. And you're on one team or the other. And he says, I can tell you the team that's going to win. He said, I don't subscribe to hope. He said, I don't subscribe to hope. I subscribe to certitude. There is no condition in which darkness is not dispelled by light. No condition in which darkness is not dispelled by light. Light will always prevail. There is no question that we will prevail. And he says, I can say that with 100% certitude. How that comes about and how many people can help bring that about. And, you know, is it really, when he said that, I just thought, man, I'm all in with this guy. I am all in with this man because it hits you like a ton of bricks. This is one of the ultimate realities. And if we want a better world, then it's up to us to build it. Stop waiting for somebody to show up on a white horse. Ain't happening.
Right.
Ain't happening. We're it, which is a marvelous. I think it's one of the most beautiful outcomes to learn that I get to have direct input into the world that I live in. That's what an opportunity, you know.
So life affirming. Yeah.
It is. I mean, and I just got to, you know, Scott wasn't sure. He's like, okay, well, so tell me a little bit about Stan. And I'm just like, well, I told him a little bit, but I mean, I think the audience, please, you can comment. I think you guys can see why I wanted so much to have Stan on the show. You represent just what the possibility and the reality of what humanity can be. And you're using your connectedness and your education to enlighten and inform and educate. And people now know a little bit more about the 12 senses. And it's just such a beautiful thing to have met you in person. And yeah, I'd love to be able to do this. And one day we will do an interview in person.
Come over into the stream of consciousness over there, the TruthStream.
Yeah. Well, Joe mentioned that you were a Yeti, and our other friend is a Yeti, Brad Olson. So we've got to get the two of you together, just for the novelty of the experience. You'll love Brad; he's amazing.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah. So we got fireworks.
Oh, there's our fireworks. So, there we go. Well, is there any? Not that we're in any rush to conclude this, but is there anything you feel? Because these stories have been very life affirming. And a beautiful thing, I think people are really craving some real world examples of this connectedness, if you will. Is there anything else that you want to share with the audience during this interview? Because I know we're going to have you back, because there's just no way we wouldn't, because there's so many topics that you can cover. But is there anything you do want to cover before we decide to part ways at some point?
Yeah. One thing comes to mind. Whoever needs to hear this, is that prevailing is a function of persistence. So whoever's listening, this is for you. You know who you are, that you're engaged in something that's absolutely necessary, not just for you, but for many other people. And you're feeling like you're not succeeding. Failure is temporary and necessary to succeed. But there is nothing that can withstand persistence. Nothing. And so I would encourage you to daily persist in the thing, and you'll find your way to its accomplishment. It's there's nothing that can resist the net effects of long-term persistence. Nothing. And that's one of the reasons this really goes back to one of the principle, a core pillar of what is necessary to establish and discern reality, and one is persistence. That which is true, that which is real, persists on its own power. Doesn't require outside power, and we're one of those things. That's one of the characteristics that we can manifest in our lives, is a refusal to quit, and putting it in a positive sense, an insistence on persisting, regardless of what anybody else thinks, regardless of what anybody else does, regardless of whether we think we're failing. But persistence causes everything else to bend the knee and yield. So that's for somebody. I have a very strong sense that's definitely for somebody who's listening, and I think you know who you are. So.
Yeah, well,
for me as well.
I think we'll keep doing the show. Right? Does that feel
good? Yeah. Is there anything else you want to ask Stan?
Oh, not at all. I could go on all night, but yeah. I mean, I did have questions about Cardio Miracle. We could save that for another conversation, or we could take.
I think we could. I think we could, do another show on that. I mean,
I think it kind of deserves its own show.
Yeah, it deserves its own show.
Yeah,
that's a substantial conversation. So yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Well,
let's honor that separately. That'd be great.
I want people to know the essence of you and who you are, and why when I just saw you, in amongst the group of amazing people, I'm like, who is this guy? And now I and others have a deeper understanding of who you are in the world, and who you are to the group at the 12 Senses, and when people were cheering for you, it was a really authentic, beautiful moment that was picked up by the EKG. And I mean, I feel like I've known you for decades, and I've only met you in person for a few days once, but that's all it took.
I'm feeling that way, and this is our first meeting. And I mean, the depth of Stan is palpable.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm really enjoying it. It's having a real tranquil effect. I love it. So
this should be natural, right? This should not be surprised.
Right.
Yeah, I feel the same way, gents. It's awesome.
Very good. Very good.
Well, I do want people, if people want to, follow you or learn more about you, or, there's plenty of interviews with you on Rumble. Where would you direct them? And I mean, and you're also, an amazing athlete, and you're going for a record, and, I think you're a pretty inspiring dude. So where can they learn more about you or follow you or et cetera, please?
I would say take that energy and lift somebody else. I haven't participated in social media for really quite some time, and that was a thoughtful decision. And
sure,
but I appreciate you asking, Joe. I appreciate you asking in the spirit and intent of the ask. And I'd ask others, really, instead of don't follow me. I'll never ask anybody to follow me. What I would do is lead, right? help lead somebody else, provide provision somebody, watch for ways to provision somebody. Yeah, watch for that close at home. And when the beautiful thing about the creative act and the natural outcome of creation is that is what we've already said. We're out of the seven. Well, there were 6 creative periods in the Genesis story, right? The one of several. Actually, there was before Hebrew was kind of Babylonianized. The effects of that were Hebrew beliefs were modified by Persian beliefs because the Jews, the Hebrews, the Israelites were in Babylon for 40 years. That's historically factual, and so the pre-Babylonian Hebrews are very different than the post-Babylonian Hebrews because they spent 3 generations in Persia, and of course they get inoculated with the Persian way of life, and so rather than 5 creative periods, there's a 7 creative period. The script that we have, which was written in the Roman period by Jewish authors, gives us a 7-day week, which is really Persian. It's not Hebrew. There's really 5 creative periods. So you have, interestingly, there are these creative periods in which the Creator says that the thing is good. And in a number of the English versions of the biblical text, the translation of the Hebrew tov is translated as good in English, but tov in Hebrew, and even in a Paleo Hebrew context, the way it's spelled and pronounced, tov doesn't mean good. It means functional. It means serviceable. And so in the narrative, the creative narrative that we have at the beginning of the Torah, we learn that the creations of the Creator are serviceable. They're built to serve, and they're fully provisioned, and they're functional. There was no judgment at the beginning. They're not good versus bad. There wasn't a judgment. There was a recognition that what was created was provisioned and serviceable. And so the question for all created things was to serve who? To serve what? For what purpose? And so I would ask everybody to, listen, to put some energy into and some intentional thought into that type of approach to your life is, if I'm built that way, that at the end of my creation, the author of creation, whoever that or whatever that is, started a process, the outcome of which, in terms of at least this finished product here, it was serviceable. Now, interestingly, there are two periods where even that observation wasn't made. The second creative period, which is when the waters were divided, between the firmament. These waters were divided. There was no expression from the Creator of whether it was serviceable or not. And then the other creative period where Adam, humanity, is created. There's no judgment on the serviceability of humanity until there is an Adam, and then, of course, according to that story, that woman is born of man, and that now there's a pair, and it's the first time as the man looks at himself, at his partner, at his helpmate, that by looking at somebody else, he can now see himself for who he is, and now he's serviceable. Oh. So when God, when the author of creation says it is not good for humanity to be alone, it's a real thing. That's why David pushes analog life. Get in contact with humans. because that's necessary in order for you to be human. And to be more fully human means you engage more and more with humans, not with virtual reality, but with reality, going outside and expanding your field of vision beyond an 8.5-inch piece of paper, or by, everybody, you look at it now, it's almost comical. You guys know this, that everybody's looking, walking around looking at this little tiny box that has this very strange ratio of height versus width.
Yeah.
And in a concomitant, although there's more access to more information, instant access to more information than ever humanly thought possible. And concurrently, people are dumber than ever. Dumb. Just dumb. And you can see the shrinking vocabulary of humanity, where the 17th, 18th centuries. God, read John Milton in Paradise Lost. Read Cervantes, and Shakespeare. Heavens, people, they didn't have dictionaries back then. They were brilliant, and they had these vocabularies that were expressive and fantastic, and expansive. And now we're using my emojis.
I know.
Now we're back to cave art, like a digital expression, a piss poor digital expression of cave art. Man,
wow,
this is regression in the absurd. This is heavy, man. Yeah, pretty soon you're going to wipe away any kind of symbols that represent, audible sounds, and just use face paint to tell how people, you just all assume the intelligent age of a 6-month-old and say, well, I can talk with my face,
They're doing it now already. BRB, LOL. In speech, it's like you don't need to abbreviate that. Like it's not even improving the syllable count. What are you doing? It's insane.
It's a great leap forward and newsworthy to say, hey, so-and-so just expanded the emoji, universe. Look, now we have a peach that doesn't have anything to do with the fruit,
Right.
And now we have, you see the corruption of emoji.
That's the biggest one. The pregnant man emoji was like peak stupidity, or at least let's hope. That's where we're at. A picture you can select, kind of like the picture of the French fries at the cash register at McDonald's. You can select that and let everybody know you're a pregnant man, or whatever the intention is behind that.
At least with cave art, you have an actual human hand where they put the paint in the mouth and put their hand on the cave and spit at it, so you get an expression of, hey, there was somebody here.
Yeah.
How do you represent the here-ness of digital absurdity, digital stupidity? So these people were absent while they were alive. So,
Right.
Lights are on, nobody's home.
wow.
So you just call out that absurdity. I tell my kids, no emojis, dudes. Words.
When the movie Idiocracy came out, it was hilarious, but now it's just depressing.
Right.
Now it's a documentary. Didn't feel like that back then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Stan, I think we're definitely going to have you back. This has been an absolute treasure. We're at about 2 hours. I think people have got a good taste of why we had you on the show, and we really appreciate you and really for enlightening the viewers and whoever sees this, whether it's now or later, about what the 12 cents, a taste of what the 12 senses are, and I'm grateful because now Scott hopefully has a little bit more of an understanding that I couldn't convey quite on my own. It really required more of a conversation, I suppose.
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to our next conversation. That's for sure. So hopefully we can make that sooner than later.
Man, me too. You guys, this has been you've done a great job eliciting a great experience. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Our honor.
Yeah.
And we do have an amazing friend, Kevin, in the background, and he's one of our producer, and we're very appreciative of him for helping things run smoothly, creating the background that we're seeing, And that
Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah, Kevin, do you have any final thoughts before we sign off for the evening?
Yeah, please.
Well, I just have to say it's been a really nice taste. Thank you, Stan, for Scott can tell you, him and I have had many conversations, and pretty much what you just summarized in 2 hours is the bulk of our conversation with everything. I'm old-fashioned. Scott knows it. I love to use big words like semblance and stuff like that. I'm expressive. I don't do emojis. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Hail humans.
Yeah.
Well, actually, even more hail literate humans. I mean, it's awesome. So
Right.
great,
Beautiful.
Kevin. Thank you. Thanks for facilitating this.
Yeah.
And thank you to the audience. And
Yeah,
you know.
please. Well, I mean, since I tried because I was when I was creating the the information on Stan, I really couldn't find a certain article or much to really point people in the direction. But we'll just have you back and they can discover more about you on our show. How about that?
Sure. However, I'd love to help.
Awesome.
Great to meet you, Joe, Scott. Great to meet you, man.
Great to meet you too. Looking forward to the next time. And audience, if there's any comments that you want to endure beyond the chat and the live,
Yeah.
be sure to drop them in the comments section because the chat will disappear. Just so
Yes.
you know. And thanks for tuning in tonight. We
Yeah, and
appreciate it.
please check. And below we put we have our link tree and we have everything on there, and we have our store on there with our products, including the Cardio Miracle is on there, and we'll have Stan back to talk about that another day. But anyway, much love. We appreciate everybody. Thank you, and we'll say good night. And thank you, Kevin. You can go ahead and end the live stream, brother. Appreciate you. Love everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.